as I read our gospel lesson today, which is our second scripture of the day, taken from the second chapter of Matthew. Too many seconds and firsts. The second chapter of Matthew, verses 13 through 23. We got there. When the Magi had departed, an angel from the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Get up, take the child and his mother and escape to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you, for Herod will soon search for the child in order to kill him." Joseph got up and during the night took the child and his mother to Egypt. He stayed there until Herod died. This fulfilled what the Lord had spoken through the prophet, "I have called my son out of Egypt." Now when Herod knew the Magi had fooled him, he grew very angry. He sent soldiers to kill all the children in Bethlehem and in all the surrounding territory who were 2 years old and younger, according to the time that he had learned from the Magi. This fulfilled the word spoken through Jeremiah the prophet. A voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and much grieving. Rachel weeping for her children, and she did not want to be comforted because they were no more. Now after King Herod died, an angel from the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt. "Get up," the angel said, "and take the child and his mother and go to the land of Israel. Those who were trying to kill the child are dead." So Joseph got up and took the child and his mother, and he went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus ruled over Judea in place of his father Herod, Joseph was afraid to go there. Having been warned in a dream, he went to the area of Galilee. He settled in a city called Nazareth, so that what was spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled. He will be called the Nazarene. This is the word of God for all people.
Thanks be to God.
You may be seated. Now we've all been there. I think most of us have been there. You are driving on a freeway. And you're going around that curve, and all of a sudden, you see your worst nightmare. A wall of red. That's right. Brake lights. And the worst part is, they're advancing towards your position. They're coming back at you. And you know this isn't just some, "Oh, it's a curve, we better slow down." You know. This is a good old-fashioned traffic jam. And you know, you ain't got nowhere to go. You're stuck in it. So what do we do when we're in a traffic jam? We turn the music up. I like that option. That is a good option. Joseph's in a traffic jam. Mary's in the traffic jam. And Jesus, a little helpless right at this point, is stuck with them in this traffic jam. And there ain't nothing he can do either. They're all in this together. But they're not in a traffic jam where there's brake lights on the turnpike. No. They're in a traffic jam where the world is literally out to get them. And it ruins all of their plans. It ruins all of their ideas. It ruins everything that they had thought was supposed to take place. Their traffic jam is one of authority trying to stamp out anything it sees as a threat. That's a traffic jam we all experience in our own lives. Sometimes it's within ourselves. Part of us wants to be the authority. Part of us wants to do something different, and so we get in war with ourselves. Who's ever had an argument with yourself? Those are my favorite. You get to imagine the little angel and the devil on each shoulder. Do it. You can get away with it. When you want to be a pastor, they make you take a bunch of psychological assessments to see that you're not crazy. I can't tell you whether or not they work. But what I can tell you is one of the questions that's in there is, if you were to go to a movie theater and you knew you could sneak into the theater and see the movie you wanted to see without having to pay and you wouldn't get caught, would you do it? And after you take this test, you have to meet with a psychological consultant who goes over your answers with you. And they basically try to tell you whether or not you're lying. And so when I did this test, I wouldn't know. I wouldn't sneak into the theater. And I sat down and he goes, well, the computer thinks you're lying. And I said, why does the computer think I'm lying? And he goes, well, you won't believe this, but the majority of people answered that yes, they would sneak into the movie if they knew they wouldn't get caught. And he goes, why didn't you put yes? And I said, well, that's wrong. And he goes, oh yeah, I forgot, you want to be a pastor. This test isn't made for pastors. It's made for everybody else. And I said, well, thank you very much. I'm glad that I broke your test. But we go to war with ourselves, and it can cause a traffic jam internally when we wage battle over what we want to do and what we should do. Or sometimes, what also can happen is that we find ourselves in a position to make a decision. We get to choose what happens. Only what we choose may have consequences. We can make a choice that benefits us and makes us feel good and shores up our position of authority. Or we can make a choice that causes us to have to sacrifice something, but somebody else doesn't get hurt that way. And so we have to make that choice. And that's a really big moral and ethical dilemma that we might face. One that we could spend many hours arguing with ourselves about. Well, it's better for me if I do this, but this person will get hurt. But if I don't do this, then I might lose this, and it just becomes a cycle. And so traffic jams happen in so many ways in our lives. And so we were on a journey. We took a road trip all the way to Christmas, and now we're here. And number one, Christmas isn't over yet. I'm one of those pastors. Spoiler alert. Now it's Christmas. It wasn't Christmas. It was Advent. Now it's Christmas. I'm that guy. But also, Christmas wasn't the destination of our road trip. That wasn't the point of our road trip. And our road trip is something where we're supposed to be on a journey the whole time. There's a great quote from Jesus where somebody says, I want to be your disciple, but I got to go home first. And he says, the Son of Man has no place to lay down his head. The guy's like, that's great. What does that mean, Jesus? And he's trying to say that his ministry, his mission is one that is not static. It is ever changing. It is ever moving. It is out there. It is doing something. You can't just go home and be complacent and call it a day. And he's saying, if you want to follow me, that's what you better buckle up for. And so Christmas wasn't our destination. It was just part of our journey, part of our road trip. But the road trip continues. Think of it like this. You set a goal for yourself. You said, I want to see a baseball game in every Major League Baseball stadium. And you accomplish your goal. Congratulations. You can choose. You can rest on your laurels and say to myself, I did so good. Self, I saw a game in every stadium. Or you could realize maybe that wasn't what the journey was about. You could think about everybody you met when you were at those baseball games. Lindsay and I, earlier this year, went to a Cleveland game. The Royals were in town. They lost. As always when I go. Somebody should get me season tickets for when the Royals are in town, because every time I go, the Royals lose. Spoiler alert. And we ended up sitting next to Kansas City fans. Our whole section, there was 5 of us. There we were, right there. And by 5 of us, I'm bringing Nora into the equation, even though she was wearing a Cleveland shirt, but I didn't get to make that decision on what shirt she was wearing. And we built this bond where I said, hey, I'm from Kansas City, but I live here now. And they said, hey, we're from this part of Kansas City. And then we got to have that conversation. Where'd you go to high school? And so you might have finished all of your Major League Baseball stadiums, and you might say to yourself, oh, I met so many awesome people. You know what? I want to go see 2 games at every Major League Baseball stadium in this country. And you start your journey over again. Except it's not an over, it's a continuation. And so that's where we are on our road trip. Now what? And that might cause us to get stuck in a traffic jam. Because part of us wants to say, I'm tired. I have a toddler, they're not sleeping well, I'm tired. Part of us might say, it's the seasons, and it was 60 the other day, and I washed the car, and now it's like cold and rainy, and so my head doesn't know what it's doing, and I'm just tired. Part of us might say, I came this far, I made it to Christmas. We're good. And then part of us might say, but I know there's more. So we become traffic jammed within ourselves. So what does all of that have to do with our scripture for today? Because that's really the question, isn't it? Yeah, I mean, I'm sure all of you are still thinking about the scripture that we just read, even as much as I'm talking about traffic jams, because today's scripture is not exactly what we call touchy-feely. It's not exactly happy, right? You're thinking to yourself, Pastor just said it's still Christmas, and we read a scripture where Herod is sending in some troops, taking out some children. That's not happy. Herod is at a traffic jam within himself. He knows, he has been told, the Magi come and they say the king of the Jews has been born, and Herod goes, I haven't had any kids lately that I know about. And he says, king of the who now? I'm the king of the Jews. And they go, no, the new one's been born. He has a decision to make. He sends the priests in and he says, figure out where in the scrolls this is written. And they find the scrolls that say, hey, the prophecy right here. And he has a choice to make. Does he, for once in his life, turn to God, or does he, as he continually does in his life, turn to himself? He is at a traffic jam in himself, and Herod does what Herod does best. He clears the traffic jam with force. And so he says, you know what? I am more important. I am more important. And so he sends in troops, and just to make sure that they get the right kid, he says all of them. 2 and under. All of them. He chooses himself. And he chooses to do irreparable harm to his people that he has been entrusted to watch over, because he's too selfish to do the right thing. Herod got rid of his traffic jam a long time ago. That's not to say that there isn't hope for Herod, that he could turn it around. He doesn't. I'd like to tell you that he did, but he doesn't. But he cleared his traffic jam a long time ago. And so now when Herod sees brake lights, he just orders in the troops, because it's expedient for him. Because our traffic jam on our road trip means we're going to have to make some choices. Do we crank up the tunes and try and drown everything out? Or do we come to the harsh reality that we are now stuck in a car? And for some of us, we're only stuck with ourselves. Which means we got to talk to ourselves. And that might be tough. Because there's a lot of stuff that we don't like. And we see the traffic jam coming, and so we get off the freeway and try to go around it. And pretend like that means we can avoid the hard things in life, the hard conversations, the hard decisions, if we just go around it. But what we don't realize often is that you can't actually avoid the traffic jam. And so if you're asked to make a decision, this is something that happens to me sometimes. As a pastor, or as a parent, or just as a person. If I don't make a decision, if I don't take a stance, if I don't do anything, if I try to go around and avoid the traffic jam, something's going to happen anyway. And often it's something worse. Somebody's going to get hurt because I just tried to play passive-aggressive or play turtle or not have to deal with it. So before we say to ourselves, well, can't we just avoid the traffic jam? No. You can, but that doesn't mean it's not going to have fallout in other places. And so Joseph and Mary and Jesus flee. Because Herod makes a decision. He orders in troops to get rid of this potential threat. And so they flee in the dark of night They take their child and they flee their home to seek a better life, to seek safety and security, because where they're from is not safe for them. They're hunted and persecuted. And so they flee. And they have to stay there for a while. And even then, they're told it's safe to go home. They get home and they find that it's not safe. And they have to go somewhere else because the traffic jam has repercussions. There's a really great commercial. And it's about assisted driving technology, but it's a commercial where a guy is walking out of a warehouse, and then you cut to all of his friends and family imagining what it would be like if he wasn't there anymore because he was hit by this car. And then it goes back, and the car has this special technology, so it stops before it hits him. And you get to see he's grateful he didn't get hit. But you got a glimpse of what it would be like without it. And everyone was sad. Everyone was hurt because someone was distracted, and that would have had consequences. And we all get distracted. And part of the reason we get distracted is because we're arguing with ourselves, we're trying to avoid something, we're trying not to make a decision, and so we get distracted, and if we get distracted too close to a traffic jam, then we can cause a pileup. So we have to ask ourselves always on our road trip, what are we trying to avoid? What are the obstacles in our way? And what is our ultimate goal of our road trip? Is our goal just to avoid all traffic jams at all costs and ignore the fallout that happens around us because we didn't want to take a stance or say something or do something? Build a relationship? Break off a relationship? Do we just try and avoid? Or do we recognize that no matter what we do, traffic jams will happen? But how we respond to a traffic jam is what matters. I remember I was in a car once, shocking, and I wasn't driving. And there was 4 of us in the car, and we were going down the freeway, and I saw a car in a ditch. But it didn't look like, oh, you know how you can tell when that car's been in the ditch for a while? I knew the car was pretty recently in that ditch. And then all of a sudden, behind me, I saw lights and I heard sirens and an ambulance coming to this accident. And the person in the passenger seat in the front said, "Woo, I'm so glad we got through there before they blocked up traffic." And I thought to myself, how often do we do that? Do we think more of ourselves than of others? The first response wasn't, I hope that person's okay. The first response was, I hope whoever is hurt in this traffic jam is okay. We often run straight to, I am going to be late. This is inconvenient for me. And that's where it stops. But our task on our road trip is to build relationships, is to build empathy for others, and is to ask ourselves tough questions, and to take a stand on something and take that traffic jam head on instead of trying to detour around it and pretend like it's not our problem. And so this Christmas, that's what our challenge is from God. God comes to challenge. He comes to comfort, but not only to comfort, he comes to challenge us to do something, to take a road trip, to get out of our comfort zone, to get on down the road, and then if we find that traffic jam in our lives, to take it head on and say, where is God in the midst of this traffic jam? And then to recognize that sometimes we aren't ready to take on this traffic jam by ourselves, and we gotta ask somebody else to get in the car with us to help us make it through. And that's okay too. So may you have the courage to continue the road trip. And may you have the perseverance to stick it out through the traffic jam. And may you know that God will be with you no matter if it's a 2-lane highway, an 8-lane interstate, or that dirt road that you probably shouldn't have been on in the first place. Because that's the God who comes in our midst and who will be with us always. Not a God of abandonment, but a God of perseverance who has taken up residence right here. You can't get rid of him no matter how hard you try, or no matter how many detours you take. Amen.